Hello, I'm Ron Whitten, Architecture Editor Emeritus of Golf Digest magazine, with another in our series of individual golf holes. Today it's the 7th hole at Pine Valley Golf Club in Pine Valley, New Jersey, one of the longtime unreachable par 5s. When you look up the term penal architecture in any primer of golf course design, you're likely to find a photo or two of Pine Valley. And quite often it's the par 5 7th, the longest hole on the course, at 636 yards. Tight and tree-lined, it's a hop over the beach off the tee, then a second shot over a chasm of sand that was once labeled the world's largest sand trap, and a third shot over yet another cross hazard of sand in front of the green, with a girdle of sand behind it for good measure. What makes it penal are the forced carries, particularly the second one, which long ago was christened Hell's Half Acre, although in truth it's over an acre and a half. While the 7th occupies basically flat terrain, Hell's Half Acre sits in a slight depression with its far end on a bit of an upslope. It's 115 yards long from front to back and about 75 yards wide. What makes it intimidating is the sand is unraked by players, so you could end up in a footprint. Plus, there are islands of broom sedge and switchgrass, evergreen bushes, and even a few stunted pines. You might hit into it and never find the ball, or find it in an unplayable lie. In 1965, Dan Jenkins selected the 7th as one of the best 18 golf holes in America, and devoted a whole chapter in his 1966 book of the same name, without ever explaining why he felt it was the best 7th hole in the country, except perhaps to say that there was no way for anyone to reach the green in 2. Back in '65, a 280-yard drive could end up just short of Hell's Half Acre. From the new back tee, a 360-yard drive will come up just short. And if you have that in your arsenal, you'll only need 270 yards all carry to reach the green in 2. Pine Valley was the dream design of retired Philadelphia hotel operator George Crump, who bought a section of New Jersey pine barrens in 1913 and proceeded to lay out what he thought would be the toughest golf course in the world. You'll note from this aerial, it's not just the 7th hole that plays hopscotch over sandy hazards. Nearly every hole has some sort of force carry over sand or water or both. I term this steeplechase golf, and it was a prevailing philosophy of a number of golf architects at the turn of the 20th century, particularly in Great Britain. Designers like Tom Dunn were almost militaristic in their designs, with defensive bunkers positioned to let no man proceed down any route without challenge. A notable exception to that philosophy was England's H.S. Colt, considered by some to be the granddaddy of the strategic school of golf course architecture. In 1914, Crump retained Colt to review his Pine Valley plans, which were already in early construction. Colt did so, rerouted several holes, and prepared a detailed proposal for each hole. You'll notice in this newspaper clipping that the par 5 7th hole was a slight dogleg left and featured no forced carries. That's even more evident in Colt's individual hole plan for number 7. But George Crump apparently had other ideas, and after Colt returned to Great Britain, Crump took Colt's plan for Pine Valley and red-penciled it with his own ideas. And the par 5 7th took the shape as the hole is today, with islands of fairway and a green separated by long stretches of white sand. This was Hell's Half Acre in the early stages of construction. At that stage, it took the form of a massive cluster of individual bunkers rather than as a single vast expanse of sand. The finished product was displayed in George C. Thomas Jr.'s 1927 book, Golf Course Architecture in America. And while some of the pockets of sand seem to be united, you can still identify individual bunker shapes. Note in the caption that Thomas gave credit to both Crump and Colt for the design, and described this forced carrying hole to be an extremely large artificial hazard. Sand was plentiful in the New Jersey pine barrens, so you simply had to dig down and find it. But still, Thomas considered this hazard to be man-made, not natural. In the early 1950s, Robert Trent Jones prepared a map of Pine Valley for Herbert Warren Winn's book, The Complete Golfer, a map that the Pine Valley Club later reproduced on its placemats and used for decades. Looking at the diagram of the 7th, I noticed that Jones had Hell's Half Acre as a meandering sand hazard down the left side, with the right side in turf. Since he was extremely accurate in his depiction of Pine Valley's other holes on his plan, I presume he was accurate here as well. although I've yet to find a photograph to verify it. I can only speculate why Hale's Half Acre was partially filled in. I don't think it was in sympathy for high-handicapped slicers. I think it was probably to give fairway mowers a landmass on which to traverse from one island fairway to the next. If they tried to go around under the trees, chances are they would have gotten stuck in the native sand. Artist Donald Moss's depiction of Pine Valley 7th in Jenkins' 1966 book shows Hale's Half Acre fully intact again, but you'll note there was no forced carry over exposed sand off the tee. This was true even in the 2015 aerial of the hole found on Google Earth. The hazard wasn't present until 2016, corresponding with a major remodeling and rebunkering carried out by architect Tom Fazio and his team. When I last played Pine Valley, I was held up on the 7th tee waiting for, of all things, a guy raking the sand. That told me two things. First, that enough players must be hitting into that bunker just off the front tees of 7 that they complained about bad lies and footprints. And two, that Pine Valley officials decided they should ease up a little on the penal nature of their course. There still aren't any rakes in the bunkers, but they do now occasionally have crewmen smooth out the sand. The third thing I noticed? There was a sign directing cart traffic. I didn't even know they allowed carts at Pine Valley. The architect A.W. Tillinghast, a Philadelphia boy himself, had been a close friend of George Crump, who died before Pine Valley was completed in 1922. In the May 1933 issue of Golf Illustrated magazine, Tillinghast gave himself credit for conceiving Hale's Half Acre. I was one of the first to walk the property with him, Tillinghast wrote, and the fact that George Crump finally incorporated two of my conceptions entirely, the long 7th and the 13th, will forever be the source of great satisfaction. There's no other proof other than Tillinghast's word, unless you examine the number of sandy cross hazards Tillinghast subsequently built on his own designs. He didn't call any of them Hale's Half Acre, but rather a great hazard. The one he did at the 17th hole at the lower course at Baltusrol in New Jersey in 1922 certainly resembles the original version at Pine Valley. In 2020, architect Gil Hance restored lower Baltusrol and relocated the great hazard farther down the fairway, nearly 400 yards off the tee. Tillinghast's great hazard on the par 5 7th at Philadelphia Cricket Club's Wissahickon course was restored about a decade ago by architect Keith Foster. A few years ago, Foster also restored the great hazard at Tillinghast's Brook Hollow in Dallas. All these cross bunkers are authentically Tillinghast, which is sort of curious because Tilly late in his career campaigned against what he called Dufford headache bunkers, bunkers that punished only poor golfers. And he went around the country recommending that clubs fill in such bunkers. I reviewed Tillinghast's reports of those travels and have never found an instance where he recommended filling in one of his great hazards. Then again, I can't find that he was ever summoned to review a course that contained one of his great hazards. In George Thomas's book, Golf Course Architecture in America, he graphically described the difference between penal and strategic design. And darned if his example of compulsory carries doesn't look exactly like the 7th hole at Pine Valley. On the right was his recommendation on how to turn that hole into a strategic one. You could still feature great hazard-type bunkers, big, bold ones, but you should give the average golfer bailout options along the way that they can use to avoid any compulsory carry. Note how much Iooss Colt's 1914 plan for the 7th at Pine Valley resembled Thomas's strategic hole. Subsequent generations of golf architects have adopted the idea of creating great hazards but leaving room to play around them. Pete Dye did that at the 16th hole at the Ocean Course at Kiowa in South Carolina. Mike Strantz did it at Monterey Peninsula Country Club's Shore Course in California. Tom Fazio did it at Monterey Peninsula's other 18, the Dunes Course. Corin Crenshaw used a great hazard to pose a bite-off-what-you-dare option at Streamsong Red in Florida. Ron Garl moved it to the outside of the dogleg at Wooden Sticks in Ontario, and where Garl created a compulsory carry on another hole at Wooden Sticks, he made it as narrow as possible so even a high handicapper has a chance to clear it. Most modern forced carries over sand are done off the tee, where golfers have the added advantage of picking their lie and teeing it up. But recently, I've noticed a return to the Pine Valley style Hale's Half Acre. Gil Hance did it on the par 5 11th at Ohoopee Match Club in Georgia. But that's a private club dedicated to match play, so it's understandable that he might pose one really daunting carry during a round. But Hans also did it on the par 5 ninth hole at Pinehurst number 4, a course he remodeled in 2018. Number 4 is a resort course where presumably all range of handicaps will tee it up. So how does this hazard differ from Hell's Half Acre at Pine Valley? The answer is it doesn't. The moral I take away from this is that it's okay architecturally to occasionally force every golfer, even high handicappers, to loft a ball in the air for 100 yards or so at the risk of landing in sand or a clump of tall grass or a bush. A little bit of penal architecture is acceptable, but a little bit goes a long ways.